Comrades, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. I am Admiral Andre, and I'm very happy to get going with Venera 1 again, at last. It's been a while since we actually built the thing and launched it, and today we finally get to see whether it was worth anything. So I've gone ahead and forwarded time. You can see it's now actually year 2, day 125, which was when the Kerbal alarm clock said the window was going to be open. So let's actually go to space and have a look at the current situation, or first at least the tracking station. Okay, so I've cleared the alarm so long. It said about 5 minutes or so before the window, but any time around this point in time is fine. And we can see basically the angles I think look good. If we just take it again with Kerbal at 90 degrees, then I have no idea what that would be, but it's more or less what the clock said, so I'm going with that. I can't be bothered to work this out manually. So I don't think there is actually a little bit of an incline in terms of Eve, but it shouldn't be an issue to reach it. Let's just actually patch through to the Venera 1. I see sometimes, what is this MNV? The Luna 1 keeps throwing that thing up. I have no idea what that means. I've never seen that before. MNV. Multinational vehicle? That won't work. Anyway, let's just go to Venera 1. So here is our proud craft. It's been in orbit now for 1 year and 110 days, which is of course completely ridiculous. We should have launched it now, but that doesn't matter. I was eager to get started with it, and of course it took a while to work out all of the specifics with Vostok. So let's just plot the course so long and see if we can actually get an encounter. Of course we have the option of making corrections during the actual trip to Eve, which is definitely what we would need to do anyway, and that is very realistic as well. But if we can get an encounter right now, that would also be fantastic. So we need to actually burn a retrograde relative to Kerbal's orbit around the Sun here. So it's always a bit of just playing around with the actual node until we get it nice and lined up. Whoops, I wasn't supposed to mess with the radial button there. It happens from time to time. Just see, something like that. So they're more or less parallel. We just want to first see if we can at least reach the orbit, and this is already way too much. Luckily it doesn't take a lot of delta V to reach Eve. So at this point it's probably a good idea to set it as a target, just because nowadays we can always see the closest approach, or at least we're supposed to. Okay, first things first, just realign this. There we go. And it's all completely wrong. That is interesting. There we go. There we go. There's something. The real problem is, of course, the inclination. The orbit is basically now in the wrong place when it comes to the inclination, and I wish maybe that's why the transfer window planner gave us a further transfer date than the alarm clock, because perhaps that transfer planner actually takes account of the inclinations as well, because this is not the best place to launch from. But luckily we've got 1.3 kilometers per second of delta V, so even if it's not optimal, we can achieve it. So there you see is pretty much on the descending node the closest approach. So beyond that, I think we would have actually an encounter there, but we'll probably have to mess with the descending node. Let me actually see if I play around with that. If we get, see there, for a second we had something. That's a bit closer. Okay, that would not be so good. Let's play with the radial buttons. So this one is going to take a bit of time to actually work out. But there you can see we get it pretty close, so it is possible. So let me just cancel that one now. And now, let's see, is this thing at least decent? Maybe I can move this a little bit more. The closer you get it to line up with the orbit, the more fuel efficient it will be. Because technically, if it's not lined up with the parallel there, that means that you're burning a bit radial. So I think if we just maybe make it a bit further, something like that. So we're generally lining up with the orbit on the other side, but we need to make an adjustment at the descending node because that 2 degrees is enough to throw us off. So let's just actually have a look. It's going to be 11 minutes about until we reach the node. And of course I have now no idea how long it's going to take for the engine. We haven't started it at any point yet. And this one does have the slight reaction wheel, which is basically the gyroscope. So how much of that do we have of the monopropellant? Oh, more than enough. Actually, we packed way too much, but that's for the maneuver change as well, or at least the slight adjustments during the transit. So let's just fast forward. I would guess maybe 30 seconds would be enough. I don't know, we can play around with it, so let me just save that in case I do something stupid, but otherwise we're just gonna have to live with a failure. So let's just jump ahead. So here again, it is more ideal to burn when the target is closest to the horizon there, otherwise you're sort of burning down into the planet a little bit. But okay, we don't have advanced assistance here, so I've got to just line this up manually, but I think we are ready. Let's go! Alright there, it wasn't quite planned very well, but at least it was fine. Burned a bit too late anyway, and then of course the maneuver node was moving a bit faster on the nav balls, but I just kept on prograde. So let me actually just have a look at the situation right now. We've got about 30 seconds of fuel left in this tank, and I think let's keep this attached, just because I'm not 100% sure how much we're going to need yet, and let's just leave that kind of decision for the time that we actually leave the sphere of Kerbin's influence. And this is a momentous occasion because this is the first time we'll be doing that now. So I'm going to forward this until we're just out of the maneuver or the sphere of influence, and then we can plan the rest of the journey. There at the end we actually passed quite close to Minmits. That was very interesting. Anyway, we're now free of Kerbin, so history has been made here. And now we can also do a much better calculation in terms of what's left for us to do to reach Eve. So the descending node is the obvious choice. Let me just do that. It's 100 days, so luckily you can see we already lined up pretty well here. And this is one of the shorter transit times, so at least we won't have to wait too long. So actually no, what am I doing? We should do the radial thing first. Something like that. How was this now? 0.7. Wrong way. There we go. When it flips again, you know it's basically 0. So now we reverse a bit. Not really, we just slow down a bit. And we can then make more fine adjustments. There we go. So we'll probably meet it on the opposite side. Now that is interesting. I was hoping to meet it either at the periapsis or before, because we have to keep in mind that Kerbal will be moving this way, albeit slower than Eve, of course. And by the time we reach Eve here, Kerbal will probably be here somewhere, which means that the antenna might actually be out of range. So that is interesting, but this is about 429 meters of delta V, which is more than we have in the upper stage there, but that's fine. That's why we have the RCS, so we can actually adjust our orbit. It will just take a bit longer to do that, but that's fine. So shall we risk it, or shall we try and find another point of approach? I think maybe that would be a pretty good idea. So instead of burning retrograde, let's just put it back to where it was, more or less, as long as the nodes are on 0, and play with the radial a little bit. It's a bit more expensive, but already I think we made a bit of progress there. Maybe we should just take this one. So Kerbal would be somewhere there. It might still be out of range. But I think it's going to be too expensive to try and meet it here somewhere. It's probably impossible. No, wrong way. You see, 1,000 already. I can't burn. There we go. You see, if we had unlimited fuel, that would be a good thing. 1,200 delta V. Then we could meet it here, which is closer to Kerbal. But I'm not going to do that. We're just going to have to take our chances and see whether the range of the antenna is actually enough. So if it is a fail, it's a fail, but at least it was an attempt. So again, the real Venera one also failed. And maybe I'm being just a bit too, just see, a bit too negative about our prospects. We might still be able to do it. Okay, so we're taking this one. Let me just see where we pass by. At least we want it to be relatively close to the surface, or at least the upper atmosphere. So this is about 26 million meters. No, let's see if we can just play around with it a little bit. Did we have a Killian counter there for a second? No way. We did actually. Or is that another? There, just there. What's that? Is that a... No, that's in another year. So we'll pass Eve again. Interesting. Maybe we should do that. Of course, it's going to be very difficult to get this right. It's so finicky, and again, with the separation of the upper stage, it will probably disturb it again. But we're actually going to meet it again, or at least the possibility is there. Then, if we don't have a signal now, maybe we will in a year. Okay, so we're sticking to that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, just turn off the RCS and use the gyroscope/reaction wheel so we don't upset the orbit at all at this point. And now I'll just forward, and once the burn is complete, I'll jump back in again. So, here we go. Quite close, 0.7 meters per second. But Of course, I'm sure we missed that second encounter because it was so finicky. But I think, okay, we don't even have an encounter. We do, actually. It's not showing the planet there, but anyway. So there we are. Quite close, I would think, but we did miss the second encounter. But I think my concern was a bit unnecessary because Kerbal has, of course, moved a lot since our departure from there. And by the time we meet Eve there, we'll be quite close, so there's no real reason to worry. I was thinking that Kerbal would move slower than it actually does, because at this point we're moving just a little bit faster than Kerbal because we're still quite close. So that should have already told me there's no reason to worry about the distance. We will be within range by the time we encounter Eve. Of course, at some point we probably would have been out of range, but by then Venera will have passed into oblivion. So let's just see if there is any possibility of still getting that second encounter at some point. So what happens after we meet? The orbit gets shifted just a little bit here. And I guess this encounter here shows the next time that we would meet. Interesting. Of course, it is possible to use Eve as a sort of a gravity assist to reach a lot of places. So let me just focus back there and see what the situation is at the moment. So we're going about 4 million. That's a bit too far for my tastes. So let me just throw in a maneuver and let's play around with it a bit. At this point, I'm not concerned about that second maneuver. I just want us to actually reach closer. There we go. So we're actually going to do sort of a polar flyby. That's very interesting. Very interesting. So maybe a bit closer than that. No, not that close. Let's say about, what's the altitude again of the atmosphere? 90, so if we go by 110 or so, we should be just fine. I can't keep this up for some reason. Oh well. 160, 119, a bit closer. 105. Oh well, let's leave it at 105. Now, of course, I just need to make this change. I'll just do it now. So what is the result? 100. Okay, we'll leave it there. It's again very finicky at this point. So a very good flyby, I think, and the benefit is this. Well, let me just think now. I was just thinking, well, the benefit is the flyby is actually going to happen over the day side of Eve, but this is right now what it looks like. By the time we get to the other side, it's actually going to be over the night side of Eve, which is not so nice. I want to see what it looks like, you know, pretending again we've never seen it up close. So maybe that's not the best way. Can we flip it so it actually goes around the other way, perhaps? No, that's just again still the same thing, really. Maybe rather like this then. At least then, if this is the day side, we'll still see a great deal of it. We just have to think ahead, you know. Actually try caps lock. No, now it's taking us further away. And now I can't get another maneuver node. Anywhere there, I just want to mess with it a bit. Okay, that way. Now for this, we definitely don't want to use RCS to turn the craft around, because that will already be enough to change the orbits. $123, there we go. So that's it, no more messing around. Let me just go back to it now. Backspace? Yes. So the signal strength is at the moment 98% to Baikonur, which is of course the other space center, and everything is fine, so that's great. Let me just maneuver this a little bit. There's no real need to, of course, but... And it's funny, you know, the antenna points completely the wrong way, but that's okay. It's obviously, again, we have to take certain shortcuts in the game. Otherwise, it's going to become too complex. At least for just casual playing. Something like that. I know it will change again, but there we go. Okay, time to fast forward, and then we'll fly by and nice and slow, and we'll have a look at Eve for the first time. And my friends, we are here. The signal, I actually like how the color changes. I think the signal is getting a slight bit weaker. It's 57% now, but that's still fine. It is 20, or what was it that we saw, 20 billion or something that the range would be. So it's fine. It's just obviously a little bit weaker. So let's have a look. This entire flyby is going to take us 5 days and 3 hours, but of course we just want to see the close-up, so there we go. Let me take another picture here. So I'm going to enjoy this very much, so here we go. Let's just get a bit closer and then we can inspect this magnificent planet. Maybe to there, just outside Gilly's orbit. Of course I doubt that we'll actually get to see Gilly at this point. Where would it be? Somewhere out here, I would imagine. Just a tiny little speck. I don't see anything. Let's just have a look again. So, the sun is that way, so it is basically perpendicular to the sun. So it must be this way. Somewhere out here is the moon of Gilly. No, I don't see anything. Oh well, focus on Eve. Okay, yes, you see, I was right about the day thing, so I'm glad I actually thought about that. So at least right now we can get to see Eve much nicer than we would have. So that's obviously another photo opportunity. Let me just maneuver the craft so it looks a little bit nicer. That is definitely the thumbnail for this video. Magnificent. Oh, I just love this, you know. Where was I before Kerbal Space Program? I love this stuff. I wish I could have gone into this field. Sometimes I regret, you know, I thought I was going to be an astronomer at school, and then I really hated maths because the whole way it was taught was just horrible. So a teacher does make all the difference, but then I thought, no, I don't want to work with this nonsense. So I went into another field, which I also love, but hey, I sometimes wonder, I could have been out there exploring, or at least with a telescope, finding new worlds, but anyway. So toggle the display too far from object at this point. Of course we're in a vacuum, I don't even need to bother. The seismic is not going to show anything. And the temperature is 246 Kelvin, which I have no idea what that is in Celsius. Let me actually look it up on my phone here quickly while we appreciate the scenery. So the result is minus 27.15 degrees Celsius, in other words freezing. If we turn that into Fahrenheit, it's minus 16.8 Fahrenheit. So I'm not really familiar with the Fahrenheit system, but still it's freezing. And I guess it's because it's pointing away from the sun, but it should therefore go much higher if I turn the craft, but I doubt that it will. No, it's exactly the same. And after all, we're getting closer and closer to the sun, so it should be going higher. But we'll just say it's because it's in the shadow. And I love how the panels track the sun here. So let's get a bit closer still and see what we can see. And it might be some time for more Moonlight Sonata. You know, it's always time for Moonlight Sonata. So I wanted to turn the craft a little bit for another photo opportunity, but at this point we are out of range because Eve is blocking us. But we should pass through again, and I'm sure it's programmed to take some nice photos. I mean, this would be the time to take pictures. Here we can see a great deal of detail with the islands and the sort of lakes and the oceans and everything. This is magnificent. Now, where exactly is Kerbal at this point? Yes, you see it's directly behind. This is so awesome, this feature. I really, really love this. Anyway, let's continue and then look at that island there. There we go. Full control back again. So it doesn't matter how many times I see Eve, you know, or any of the other planets. I always think, wow, it's so amazing. Another photo opportunity and another and another and another. I must have like 6,000 screenshots in total of all my different games. So yes, very, very nice. Absolute success, this mission. Even though we had to make some slight inclination changes that I didn't bargain on, but still. Absolute success. So from here on out, Venera 1 will just wander the solar system for the rest of time until it's probably going to impact Eve at some point. Though that might be some time. At this point we get no further encounters, but I'm sure at this point here or there, at some point in the future, it will either be slingshotted somewhere else or it will have an impact. So basically we can forget about it. It has fulfilled its mission. 2.27 meters per second. So at this distance that should show us that Eve has more gravity than Kerbal. Vacuum 0, of course. We are even colder now. So there we are. Magnificent. Well, I guess this is a bit of a shorter episode, but still something that we had to give some proper attention to, you know. So hopefully there'll be many more of this in the future. So actually, let's complete this slingshot and then I'll just see you again at the Space Center to say goodbye, basically, and maybe talk a little bit about the future. Okay, so the sun is setting here now. But let me just go in here. In between recordings since the last episode, which was again a double episode despite my intentions, but I'm fine with that. So just be aware that there'll be a lot more of those double episodes in the future, I'm sure, because I keep playing and it's just too much fun to stop at 30 minutes. So anyway. So between this recording and the last one, I have messed around a little bit with the Atlas and with the Gemini. Now with Gemini, I've had a lot of problems, as you could expect. I've even looked on Google Images to see what other people have come up with, and I tend not to do that because I want this to be my creations. But nobody really has a good stock Gemini solution. There's a lot of clipping and all of that. But anyway, let me just show you quickly and then we can work on those in the next episode. Although I think Gemini will be for further down the road, let's just quickly have a look at it for now. Then we'll look at Atlas a bit more. So I just called this GLV. So this is very rough at this point. You know, the interstage here has some gaps and the scale isn't quite right and all that, but I just wanted to get something to have a look at. So this, I agree, is not a very elegant Gemini. However, I do want this one to be powered with the monopropellant again, and the real thing had two of the engines on the side. If you look very carefully at the pictures, you can see them. But we'll look in detail at that much later. Now, of course, the real thing would probably look more like this. You know, it gets wider the whole time, but then we're getting into the level 3 diameter, and that is simply nuts for a Gemini. That's for Apollo. So at some point, you know, there has to be a lot of compromises with this. I thought about a couple of things. For example, I tried that as well, taking this thing as the main capsule, then of course having the heat shield on the bottom. Okay, none of these things are connected now, so it's just for illustration purposes. Then having the RCS tank on the top because the capsule has that bit of elongation at the top. Then of course the docking port as well, and then two of these command pods, which I then of course rotate, but basically inside there, one on each side, so that the door just sticks out on the side. Of course, again, the real thing, the two doors were next to each other, and then the windows as well, but if I do that, then the weight will be unbalanced. So that's the closest I think I could get for a capsule that still looks very nice. Of course, then we still have the same problem of the service type module thing on the bottom. It's not wider, it's the same width, but I'm okay with that. That's one of our compromises. But then I started playing around with the, you know, the stock 2 Kerbal capsule or lander essentially, but of course we just converted into a capsule by adding the heat shield. Then I thought, what if I actually put an empty tank here? This is just for a bit of height, you know. Then again the same on top as that one, but then using the fairings, which are of course clipped in here now because I wanted them to sit flush with the side of the capsule. And if you are familiar with this capsule, you'll know that if I take this, for example, on top, it's going to be wider than the capsule. You see, it gets narrower as it goes up, and then it looks like it's just wearing a hat, which I don't like. So this thing fits flush with that, and it looks quite nice actually. So that's a possible solution for a 2 Kerbal capsule that I came up with. Again, very rough, but there we are. Of course, mods like the FASA mod can do this really well because they have the actual Gemini type model, but I stick with stock like I said at the beginning. So something like that. And then of course the issue is it has to be lighter than the 3-person command pod, otherwise what's the point? But I don't want to use this, and I know some people on the Google Images, they just use this one, and of course you just put 2 Kerbals in there. And I admit, with the 2 windows it does look a little bit like the Gemini capsule, but this is Apollo. We keep this for later, so it has to be something different. And if I take 2 of these capsules, then we're going to end up with a horrible clipped mess there. And of course, if I put the heat shield on, the shape is not round and all of that. So it's just very, very difficult to do a Gemini properly. So we're going to have to end up with some compromise. Then in terms of a Voscod, we have the same issue. And there I would think it's actually even more difficult to fix it, because we anyway sit with the Vostok just with a capsule like that. So to make this into a two-person one is again going to be a horrible clipped mess, which I don't want. So there is not going to be a Voscod in this series. So now in terms of the better one, and that is somewhere in here. What did I call it? Is it this one? No, this one. Untitled Spacecraft. Very inspired name, but anyway. There is my first version first attempt at a version of the Mercury Atlas combination. Now again, I know here that the real thing is a lot more complex on the bottom here. So I tried, you can see there's still a fairing in there. I thought if I could get some kind of fairing to cover the thing and then it drops off, or if I use some of these structural plates, perhaps I messed around with those for an hour or something like that. I even tried different wing sections, but it all just doesn't look right. It looks a bit like a mess. So this is actually the best thing I could come up with. Obviously, we'll look at the images in the next episode, but the Atlas booster has these sorts of things on the side, and the one is longer than the other, so I thought, why not just attach the engines onto that? And then, of course, this is a 1.5-stage model, so the boosters drop off at some point. This thing is not gimbaled. None of these are. It uses these twitch engines on both sides for gimbal control. And then of course we just have a Mercury capsule at the top there. This thing I still have to look at where these connections are on the real thing and so on, but this is just a rough sort of outline of what I think it's gonna look like. So it seems I'm already quite happy with this one, certainly more than the Gemini. So maybe in the next video then we can just take this further and I'll really break down what I did here, and we can try to sort this out. Because if we look at the images, we'll see there is like a cover that fits over all of these engines, and when these two drop off, that cover comes with it. And then you've basically got that left, you know, this kind of pointy cone with the engine on the bottom. So as it is right now, it looks very good, I must say. You know, I'm not blowing my own horn or anything, I'm just saying I'm quite happy with that. But then if we add the engines, we get this. So even this is not very bad. It still has that sort of, if you just look from further away, the outline is still one that goes wider, and this is all stuff, and then it drops off. So anyway, then I guess we can deal with that next time. So with all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode and the Venera flyby. I'm glad it was a success, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching, and have a fantastic day as always.